Hello, everybody, and welcome to the live. I just want to double check if you can all hear me before I start talking. It's always my fear that I'm going to do an entire live and no one can hear me. So if you are, I see there are a couple of people online. If you could just let me know that you can hear me okay and see me okay, and then we shall get started. We shall get started. I can see there's a few people. I know that there is a slight delay from the comments and the actual live that I'm seeing. So we'll have to work with that, especially when we come to asking questions later in the live. Okay. Oh, Jen can hear me. Hi, Jen. Super. Okay, as long as you can hear me fine, then I shall crack on as long as one person confirms. So, welcome. My name is Colleen, and I am an animal communicator. I thought I would do this live because I know many people see me online and you see all my posts, but it's quite nice to actually just do a sort of like a summarized chat about what animal communication is, what it isn't, how it can benefit people, the sorts of questions that they can ask, and things like that. So I have my notes here. I'm going to plow ahead, but I am going to keep checking the chat. So if you do have any questions, just fire them off in the chat and I'll keep looking across and I'll answer them as we go. All right. Hey, Elsa. I was just thinking of you yesterday, funny enough. Super. Okie dokie. So, yeah. Okay. So my name is Colleen. You guys all know me by now. I live in France with my husband and an ever increasing number of cats. We currently have 6. I got started in animal communication quite it, quite by surprise. I wasn't one of these people who could talk to animals my entire life and had all these amazing relationships with my animals when I was a child. I think it was about 5 years ago now, I qualified as a Reiki practitioner, and I was doing a distance Reiki session with a cat in America, and I was kind of deep in the zone with this cat, and this very, very vivid image popped into my head. And I laugh about it now because at the time I really thought I'd nodded off, to sleep. But this image popped up of these tall bay windows with long draped curtains and this little window seat with a cushion on it. And the color of the curtains, they were like this mustard color. I mean, it was a very vivid picture. And I remember being taken quite by surprise because it came from nowhere. And after the session, I was chatting with the lady when I was giving her feedback about the Reiki session. And I don't know what prompted me to do it. I'm glad I did. But I just mentioned to her, oh, by the way, the strangest thing happened. I got this image and I described the image. And she said, oh my God, Colleen, you've just described our lounge window, and that window seat is where the cat sleeps. And I remember inside thinking, what the heck? But not wanting to appear unprofessional, obviously. And I acted very nonchalantly and very professionally and got off the call with this lady and was so blown away that I immediately, researched online if animals could talk to people, thinking that I'd lost the plot completely. But of course, it came up with loads of information about interspecies communication, which is a thing. so, so that's how I started. And from then, I just read as much as I could. I subscribed to every newsletter, every website, everything that I could get my hands on. I read countless books. I watched countless YouTube videos, and then eventually I did a course, and the course was by a lady called Diane King, and she's in Sydney in Australia. Big shout out to her. I did a course through her, and that gave me a structure, a framework to work to, and that's that kind of got me started on my professional way. So that's how I got started. So that launches me into the next question here, which is, do you have to have a gift to be able to talk to animals? So I would say absolutely not. It's the way I liken it is that everybody can play the piano. It's just that some have an easier have a quicker way of learning, have a quicker way, they have a natural aptitude perhaps. Some people will have to practice very, very hard and learn and do the exercises, and other people will just be a natural. And I think it's the same thing. I know that things like intuition and mental telepathy is something that we all have. We're all born with it, but somehow as we grow into adults, we mature, and those kind of things fade out and get taken over by modern day things. So I think everybody can do it. It's just that you have to find a way to learn it that suits you. So if it is something that you do want to become, please just go for it. I can give you a list of books and websites and all sorts of things if you are interested in learning. So what is animal communication and what isn't it? So I hear a lot of, let's start with what it isn't, because it's one of my bugbears. People refer to it as mind reading. And this makes me crazy, because mind reading in my eyes is I sit here and I burrow into your mind and I grab all the bits of information and I come out and I go, haha, look what I know now because I read your mind. It seems a very invasive, it might just be me, the terminology might be different in different cultures or countries, but for me, I do not class animal communication as mind reading. Animal communication, the keys in the word, is a two-way process, much like it is with a person. And if you sit down with a person and you want to have a conversation with them, it's two ways. You ask a question, and if the person feels comfortable replying, they will reply. And if you feel comfortable replying, you reply, and it becomes a conversation. It is a two-way thing. If an animal does not want to answer a question, it won't. All right. So I sometimes have, rescue animals, perhaps, when we're trying to find out about rescue animals' pasts. If I have had before where the animal will give me some insight as to its past, but it comes with an absolute massive burden of emotional turmoil. And then I know, do you know what? This animal doesn't want to talk about its past. People don't want to talk about their past if they have traumatic histories. And it's the same with animals. So it's a communication. It is a two-way conversation. I ask a question, the animal replies. The animal is never under any duress or pressure to reply. I make that very, very clear at the beginning of the conversation. So it's done via mental telepathy. And it's completely free will. I always ask the animal permission before I connect with it. I introduce myself, say what it is that I'd like to do and why, and then they have the option of whether they want to talk to me or not. I hope that makes sense. So it's not mind reading. No. All right, so why do you need a photo? So people ask, why do you need a photo? The photo for me is what connects me to the animals. So much like Reiki it works on the basis that everything is connected via energy. Animal communication works the same. But the photograph, for me personally, allows me to focus that energy and that intent on communicating with that animal. If for me you say, my cat's name is Spot, and I just go, I want to speak to Spot, I might get barraged by 12,000 animals in the world called Spot. So for me, I like to know what the animal looks like, so I can picture that animal in my mind as I'm looking at the photo and go, that's the animal that I want to connect to. I ask for photos that are recent, because if I have a photograph that's taken 5 years ago, I might connect to that energy that's old, and I might not give the most recent up-to-date information. So for me, I always say it needs to be within a couple of weeks, unless there's something very, very distinct that we need a very recent photo. Okay. No questions so far. Nope. Okie dokie. If any of you have just joined, feel free to pop any questions in the chat, and I'll keep checking and I'll answer them as we go through. So the next thing people ask is, do I have to give you information beforehand? So the less information I'm given beforehand, for me, the better, unless it's specific to what it is we're trying to do with the animal. So, I don't want the entire history of the animal and how they came to be with you and all their preferences in life, because that's going to skew what I'm going to read, because I'll already have information and my analytical brain will start making its own conclusions and start making up its little stories. And So the only information I ask for beforehand is how old the animal is, how long it's been with you, if it's an animal that's passed, how long was it with you before it passed, how long ago it passed, things like that, so that it gives me a little bit of context. The questions, I ask people to give me questions because rather than just sit down and expect an animal to give me all this information, what I find is that the client, i.e., you guys, will need to know some information. You're coming to me because these are the things that you would like to know about your animal. For you, that's important. If I just sit down with an animal and say, hey, my name's Colleen, what would you like to chat about? They might go, oh, do you know what? I'd like to chat about this really cool game of ball that I played with this person on this day. That was the best thing ever. And then they talk about that fantastic day. And I get back to you and I say, oh, your animal had this fantastic game of ball. And you're like, well, what about all my questions, Colleen? You haven't told me about my questions. So the questions give me focus. All right. So I think what an animal thinks is important to tell us is one thing, and what you need to know is another thing. So what I ask for people is to give me questions. The questions give me some focus and give the communication that I have with the animal some structure. At the end of the communication process, I always ask the animal if there's anything they want to say. So if they've answered all the questions that you, the client, would like to ask, and then the animal says, oh, by the way, I had this really cool day playing ball with this person, then we include that. And then I get back to the client and say, here's all your answers to the questions. Oh, and by the way, they really had fun that day playing ball. Okay, so at least that way everybody's happy. So the animal gets a chance to say something that perhaps wasn't covered in the communication process, and the client gets the questions answered. Let me just check. So Jen's asking, any big differences between, cats. The little emoticon sign is over the top of your comment, but I can see. Okay, so any big differences between how cats communicate compared to dogs? No, it's really, really strange. I kind of had secretly hoped that dogs would have a certain mannerism, cats would have a certain mannerism, horses would have a certain mannerism, etc., etc. But on the whole, I would say there isn't a huge amount of difference. However, I would say that cats are not as forthcoming. So dogs are very, very open and very very willing to share, whereas cats sometimes are a little bit, I don't want to say standoffish because that sounds negative. Cats are a little bit more careful with the information that they give until they've warmed up. It's like they're a little bit reserved. But really, that's the only difference. I remember the first time I got to speak to a rabbit, I was so excited because I thought, oh, great, I'm going to speak to rabbits. And is it going to be any difference? And it wasn't. I was gutted. I was gutted. Right. So just a bit on from the information that I give beforehand. I don't do live readings. Now, this is just my personal preference. Other animal communicators might operate differently, so don't take this as an animal communicator thing. This is just the way I work. A live reading is you and I chatting on Zoom. You bring Spot into the call and go, hey, Colleen, here's Spot. And then I do the communication with Spot. I ask Spot, right, your mum wants to know why you're chewing the carpet, and then wait for the answer. And then I say to you, okay, she's chewing the carpet because she likes the feel of the tassels as she swallows your carpet or something. I don't know. Okay, so I don't do live readings. There's a variety of reasons for me, because when I'm connecting to the animal, in my experience, the information for me personally, and this is just me, doesn't always come immediately. Sometimes I can ask a question to an animal and the information will be there instantly. Sometimes I ask a question and it can take a while for that to come through. So obviously I don't want to be sitting there in front of you like waiting for that information to come through, when you could have a better use of your time instead of waiting. All right, so I do the readings on my own. I well, I'll come back. I'll come to that in a second about how I do the readings. I just want to say I don't do live readings. So Elsa's asked, do animals ever refuse to communicate with you? Any examples? Yes. Yes. So this was all part of my learning process when I first started. I had a horse. I didn't have a horse. I was talking to a horse, and I every time I tried to connect to the horse, I couldn't get anything. Absolutely nothing. It was like a brick wall. Um, and it was early days, so one doubts oneself. And eventually I got back to the lady, and I just said, look, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to delay your reading by a day because I've been trying to connect with your horse for the last hour and a half, and I just haven't been able to do it. And she emailed back. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I forgot to tell you, he's actually in a lesson for those 2 hours. So that was a lesson for me. So now I tell people I'm going to be talking to your animal on this day in the morning. Nothing exceptional has to be done, but let me know if they've got a vet appointment, someone coming round, they're going for a walk, they have a lesson or something. So it wasn't quite that he had refused to talk to me, but he just simply shut me out because he was concentrating on something else. I have had an odd example where I was trying to connect with I think it was a cat, and I kept getting a man. And this was early days as well, when I started having people come through, when I was doing mediumship readings for animals, and I couldn't connect to this cat because there was just an image of a man. And I remember, because it was early days, I remember getting hold of my animal communication tutor and going, oh, I can't do this anymore. I'm trying to connect to this cat, and all I'm getting is this man. And she said to me, don't fret. Just go back, try and connect to the cat. And if the man's there again, ask him what he's got to do with the cat. Explain to him what it is that you want to do with the cat. If he's got nothing to do with the cat, politely ask him to move on. And I was like, what? But exactly that. I went back, and sure enough, there he was again. I asked him if he had anything to do with the cat, and he told me he was the caretaker. Beautiful. And I've had experience now that many times where animals that have passed have people, sometimes people that the client knows, sometimes not, that are there to accompany the animal for whatever reason. And as soon as I explained, great, I'm here on behalf of the cat's guardian to ask it some questions because she wants to know how it is and what it's doing, he disappeared, and there was the cat. So I haven't had animals refuse as such, Elsa, but I've had where I haven't been able to connect for other reasons. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so what can animal communication be used for? So I know a lot of people go, oh, well, I don't need to know if my dog's happy because I can see that they're happy. There's so much more to animal communication rather than just finding out if your animal's happy. I mean, yes, you obviously want to find out if your animal's happy, but there's so much more. So I've got them kind of grouped into categories. So general inquiries. Do you feel safe? Very, very useful for rescue animals or reactive animals or fearful animals. So do you feel safe? Are you happy? Fair enough. Yeah. Do you feel comfortable with others in your household? Do you feel comfortable with the other animals? What do you feel about the other animals in your household? How do you feel about life? Those kind of day-to-day well-being questions, they might seem small, but they can be massive in an animal's life. Massive. I get a lot of multi-animal readings, so it's really interesting to know what animals think of each other and how they interact with each other. Sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. So we all know, if we're in multi-animal households, that sometimes it can be okay and sometimes not. Elderly animals. So when an animal reaches a certain age, much like people, you want to double check everything. You want to find out if they're comfortable. Are they in any pain? Do they have everything that they need? Are they having any difficulties getting around? Is there any food which they prefer as they're getting older? Then difficult questions. Difficult for us, but I assure you, not difficult for animals. Are you ready to transition? Would you like help transitioning? A hard one for people. Would you like help transitioning? Do you have any requirements? What would you like us to do with you after you've transitioned? Things like that. And I think I just did a post just this week about elderly animals and how important it was to ask all those questions beforehand. And you might be really surprised by, what animals need from us in those last months, weeks, days before they pass. Behavior issues. So I'll expand on this a little bit because there is a little bit of a crossover with behaviorists, but there is a huge difference. So I will clarify on that. So behavior issues, animal communication, in my eyes, right? Animal communication with regards to behavior issues can find out why the animal does that behavior, what it's feeling when it does that specific behavior. So, why are you barking so much? What is it that's going through your head as you're barking so much? Why are you biting the postman when he's putting letters through the door? What is it that you're thinking when you do that? That will give us insight into, in fact, I think there was a dog that barked, but it was in UK, I don't know the rest of the world. In UK, they have the letterboxes in the doors, and it's on quite a tight spring, and it makes like a thud noise, when you push the letters through when it thuds back down again. And there was a dog that used to go ballistic, absolutely ballistic when he heard that noise. And when I communicated with him, he was frightened because it made a hell of a noise and it scared the proverbial out of him. And I just remember telling me, I feel consumed with fear whenever he heard this noise. So all we did was we changed from using that post box to putting a little post box outside the house, outside the front door, so the postman could put the letters in there. And then of course there wasn't that noise, and he stopped barking. So yeah, so behavior issues. We can find out what the emotion is behind the behavior. However, with very small behavior issues, animal communication can sometimes change the behavior because you can talk to the animal and you can say, right, when you do this behavior, this is the consequence. When you do this behavior, this will be the consequence. And for smaller issues, that has worked. But for larger, more ingrained behavior issues, it's at that time that I would then recommend people seek, qualified behaviorists, not necessarily trainers, but behaviorists, because they are specialized in understanding everything about an animal's behavior and therefore are able to, now they know from the communication session that I did, what's the emotion behind the behavior. They can work with the animal and the people to actually change the behavior. So there's a bit of an overlap there. Stacey, I'll answer your question in 2 seconds when I'm finished this section, all right? Excuse me. So the next type of questions you can ask is about changes in the household. So, if you bring in a new animal home, shock, horror, your animal at home thinking, wow, this is great. This is the life. I've got everything I need. And then you bring another animal home and they go, what are they doing here? So it's nice to be able to speak to animals and say, right, you are the only animal in the house now, or perhaps it's just you and your mate. Your mum's thinking of bringing home another dog. You don't need to fear. Everything's fine. You'll still get the same amount of food. You'll still get the same love. You're still safe. You're still loved, etc., etc. And explain to animals that what the changes are going to be so that they can be prepared. And the same goes for bringing new family members home. If your boyfriend moves in, if you get married, if you bring a baby home, things like that, they are going to be disruptive to the animal, and the animal's not going to understand. The whole dynamic in the house will change. The emotional vibe in the house will change, both with new animals and new people. And animals feel that. And if they don't know why it's happening, they'll get stressed. And when they get stressed, that's when the behavior comes that isn't acceptable. Preparing for vet visits as well. So vet visits, I've done many communications where animals are going off to the vet and people have said, can you explain to the animal what's going to happen? There was a dog just recently that had really quite a lot of work done, and it involved all sorts of machinery. I actually Googled the machinery so that I could picture it, so that when I gave the information to the animal, it wouldn't be frightened. And then also preparing for travel. So if you're going on holidays and you're leaving the animal behind at home with pet sitters, or you're putting it in a cattery or kennel, I can let them know about that. And also if you're moving countries. So I just did a recent one where a dog moved from America to Australia, long trip over the period of like 2 weeks. And then I support the animal the entire way so that they know what's happening. And again, I can't stress enough, when an animal knows what's happening, it's not going to be as stressed about those changes. You can also find out about an animal's past if you've recently got a dog who's of a mature age, or it's had owners before you. You're able to now find out what's happened to that animal in the past, so that you can give it the best present and future. If you know that if the animal's been beaten, for instance, or if the animal, if there's a specific type of person that the animal had a bad experience with, you know that you're going to have to introduce that type of person now, slower and more steady. So if you know an animal's past, you can allow, excuse me, make allowances for it in the current time so that it feels safe. And then lastly, of course, there's rainbow bridge readings. So I call them rainbow bridge readings, but it's speaking to animals that have passed. So we tend to wait at least 2 weeks after they've passed to give them a chance to settle. But yeah, I can speak to animals that have passed. And this is helpful for people who perhaps lost animals very quickly and they didn't have a chance to say all those things that they wanted to say before the animal went. And also to find out if the animal's okay, what it felt like in that moment, those sorts of things. So I'm just going to check the questions now. So Stacey had a question. Stacey says, do you ever communicate with a pet who has passed and the pet says, I'm just going to take a sip of water. Do you ever communicate with a pet who has passed and the pet says it is always with its human in spirit, or frequently visits? Yes. So quite often an animal who has already passed will tell me how it's with its current person in spirit. So there's a couple of examples. There was one cat who said to me, the words that he gave me were dance. I think it was something like dances in light. It was a curious phrase, but it was very distinct. And I've learned over time that if I don't understand the phrase, it doesn't matter. I have to just give it to the client, because the message isn't for me, it's for the client. And when I communicated this back to the client said, oh my gosh, her surviving cat had been glued to the spot just inside the patio door where the cat that had passed used to sleep on the floor. And it was watching the shimmering of light with the sunlight in this patio door. And it was like, oh my God. And in those moments, you just think the cat knew that that's how he was going to have his chance to appear to the surviving cat and his mum. And that's why he said this, it was dances in light or shimmers in light or something like that. So yes, they do often tell me if they're coming back. Quite often they will give me exactly what signs. Sometimes it's animals. There's a lady that sees ladybugs whenever her cat is around. Yeah, they don't tell me how often they will visit, but they do tell me that they do visit and that they will visit. Some animals tell me that they will visit, but it will take time, or that the people have to wait, but they need to be patient because they will see them. So I don't think there's a specific time. It's not like the animal passes and all, immediately it's there with you. I think that they sometimes have to take time to appear. So, but yes, I did a blog post, Stacey, on my website. You'll see. I think it's called something like "Signs from Rainbow Bridge" or something, and I mention a lot of the examples there, what people have seen or what animals have told me, how they're going to appear once they've passed. So I hope that answers your question. Elsa asks, have you tried any other questions concerning an animal's future life when chatting, when communicating, or had questions concerning what life is like for an animal since it passed? So, no. With regards to the future, I know we did the future one for you, which was quite an interesting one, if I remember correctly. But no, people tend to not ask about future questions as much as current ones and how they're feeling. And had questions concerning what life is like for an animal since it passed. The closest I've had to that is people asking things like, what can you see now? Or what are you doing now? Or those types of questions. And I have varying answers to that. So I've had everything from cats sleeping under trees, seemingly outside. I've had a dog who was running in long grass. I've had I had this really amazing one once where the cat was telling me, I think it was a cat. Yeah, it was a cat a cat that had passed, and he was running in this very specific scene. And when I explained it to the lady, because I said he's on like a hill, and the hill goes down, and there's trees, and there's like the house is at the bottom of this hill, and there's a stream nearby, and I was describing this scene, and she said, "Oh, that's really weird. That sounds like our backyard." And I thought, "Oh," and I said, "Well, have you seen a cat around?" And she said, "No, no." So I said, "Okay, that's really strange." And a bit later in the conversation, I think Stacey, you were just asking about the animals communicating if they visited, and I think I asked something similar to this cat, and it said something something really odd, like brown furry thing or something. And again, when I relayed this back to the client, and I was thinking, oh my god, I've got no idea what this means, and as soon as I said it to the client, she was like, oh my god, I know what's going on now. She said, I sit outside on my back porch. She's a writer. She sits outside on her back porch. And she said, there's a chipmunk that started to come visit me. And it comes from the backyard, runs onto the porch and jumps up onto the table and sits with her as she writes. And she said, my cat used to sit on the table with its paw or its head or something on her arm as she typed, and we realized that the cat had reincarnated as this chipmunk. And it was like, oh my, in those moments where you just sit there and you just think, oh my God, I can't even believe this is happening. But the similarities were just insane. So yeah, so I've had examples from animals where they describe scenes. So like I said, I've had the cats under the oak tree. I've had dogs running in grass. I've had a cat walking down a cobbled street with a very well-dressed man. We weren't really sure there if perhaps it had reincarnated or if this man was a guardian. But yeah, very, very interesting. I have had some animals who've described uh, things which don't seem earthly. So I remember one animal, I can't remember what it was now, describing lots of gold threads, just gold threads everywhere. And I mean, it was a most beautiful scene, but I had no idea what it was. So okay, so Stacy has another question here. Says has a deceased pet ever told you that he or she came back as another animal on Earth, reincarnation? Oh, I was going to say I just answered that, but yeah, I just answered it. Yeah. Okie dokie. So now I'm just going to explain to you the process of how I do the type of readings that I do, so that you understand the process. So I've already explained earlier on that I don't do live readings. So really, when you make a purchase, there's two options. There's email feedback and video feedback. With both options, I do the reading first. I type up a full transcript. So remember, you've sent me the questions. So as I'm asking the questions of the animal, I'm typing it all up. I type up things, I quote things if the animal says something specific, or I describe things if animals give me a scene or something. I type it up. When I'm finished the document, if you've bought the email feedback, I email you the document. All right. You have a chance, obviously, to ask me clarifying questions like, Colleen, what on earth did you mean by a brown furry thing? Okay. If you've ordered the video feedback, what I do is, as soon as you've bought the video feedback, I then send you my calendar and you book a session for the video conference. I do the communication. I have the document. I hang on to the document until the video session. And then when we have the video session, we go through the document together. And the reason why that's so much better is it's, as you can see, I'm quite animated and you get a lot more detail doing it that way, because I can make the sounds that the animals made and I can describe things, and you can say, oh, when you saw that, what did that feel like, or was there somebody else there? You can ask the questions immediately, and I can say, oh, actually there was someone else there, yes, blah blah. All right, so the video sessions, obviously the video sessions are more expensive, but so that's what happens. So you have those two options. All right, I think that's it. Video, email, righty ho. Okay, so are you ready? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk you through an exercise to help you experience how I get the messages. All right, so I'm just going to ask you to imagine a scene, all right, as we go through it together. So before I do that, if I ask you all to picture an orange in your head, can you picture an orange in your mind's eye? Just tell me if you can picture it, because I know some people can't. So I just want to make sure. Can you picture an orange? It's so weird. There's such a delay on the there's such a delay on the record screen as opposed to the live screen. Okay, Stacy can picture an orange. Okie dokie. Good. All right. Oh, Heather's here too. Hi, Heather. I recognize your the art of inviting happiness. Okay, so you can picture an orange. All right, so we should be okay with the exercise then. All right, so I don't know who DP, but DP can see an orange. Okay, perfect. So we'll crack on then. So imagine, you can close your eyes if you want, might be easier, but imagine you've just walked into a restaurant and you've sat down. Close your eyes in that restaurant. Tell me what you can hear. What can you hear around you in that restaurant? Can you hear plates clinking? Can you hear people talking? Can you hear perhaps music playing in the background? Maybe somebody's tinkling on a piano in the back. Can you hear traffic on the road outside, perhaps? And as you hear all those sounds around you, do you think you could narrow in on them? Do you think you could narrow in on one? Perhaps there's a couple talking behind you. Maybe they're discussing wedding plans, and you find yourself kind of zoning in because you want to listen to the wedding plans. Yeah? Okay. So that is one of the ways that I receive messages from animals. I literally, I hear, if I say I hear it in my mind's eye, you now all know what I mean, right? Because now you're all there in that restaurant and you are imagining all those sounds that you can hear. So, for instance, I told a horse owner once that the horse didn't like a metallic clanging noise at the stables because I could hear clunk, 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 clunk. This metallic, that's what you get in the video feedback session. See, clunk, clunk. I told the owner that this metallic clunking noise, the horse didn't like it. And she was like, no, there's no metallic clanking noises at the stables. And I was like, okay, I can hear it. So, as always, we leave it. And sure enough, a few days later, she called me up and she said, I was there late one night and discovered that there's a lamppost on the road that has a sign hanging off it, and the sign has come loose and it clunks on the lamppost and it makes this clanging noise. Interesting, right? So, yeah, sometimes I can hear sounds. So, bangs, I hear barking, screaming. I can hear water running and singing. If you caught a recent post of mine about animals not giving up their people's secrets, but how the one cat did tell me that its person sang to her. So that was lovely. So I literally heard a person singing. I don't know whether the sound that I heard was the actual lady singing. Um, it was just what the cat shared with me, was how the cat interpreted. Okay, so that's one of the ways that I can get messages from animals is I hear things. Right, so take yourself back to the restaurant. So now you must be hungry and you're ready to eat, right? What can you smell? What can you smell in this restaurant? Can you smell perhaps baked bread? Maybe toast? Maybe some roast chicken? Maybe spices? Maybe if you're sitting on the pavement outside the restaurant, you can smell cars. What can you smell? All right, so this is another way that I get messages from animals. These aren't always so nice. They aren't always so nice. Um, but I get these also in mediumship readings. I get smells. So I had an elderly lady appear in a reading for a cat that was about to transition. It hadn't transitioned yet. It was about to transition, and before the lady appeared, I got the wonderful smell of baking cookies. It was the most glorious smell. You know, when you just, because it's just so lovely. And when I fed that back to the client, she said, that's absolutely my great grandmother. And I just thought, wow, isn't it lovely to know that the great grandmother is there waiting for that cat as it transitions? Absolutely beautiful. So, cookies is a lovely smell, but I have smelt other smells which I won't go into here. As you can imagine. Right. So back to the restaurant. Now you've ordered your food and it arrives along with your drink. You pick up the glass to drink it, and it's an ice cold drink. Ice cold. Can you feel the sensation of cold on your hand as you pick up that glass or that can or that bottle? Can you feel that cold feeling on your hand? And you even perhaps feel a little bit of condensation because it's wet because they brought it from the fridge and it's now out in the restaurant. A little bit of condensation on the container. Can you feel that? Maybe you ordered coffee and maybe it feels hot. Yeah? So I can also feel heat or cold. And because of that, I can feel physical sensations as well. So I can feel nausea, I can feel pain. That did take me by surprise at the beginning. I can remember doing a reading for an animal that I kept getting a pain in my knee. I kept sitting and thinking, what on earth's going on with this bloody knee? I don't know what's going on. There's nothing wrong with my knee. And I'd stand up and everything would be fine. And I'd go back into the reading and I'd get a sore knee. And eventually realized it's like, oh, sorry. It was early days, and you have to apologize to the animal, like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. I'm only new at this. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. All right. I'll tell your guardian you've got a sore knee. So with some of the readings, I do a Reiki scan. So I check with the animal how it's feeling all over its body. And literally, I go all over the body and give it the opportunity to share with me if it's having some discomfort. So it can, it can, it can sometimes not tell me, but most of the time it does. So I'll pick up if it's feeling stiff in its hips, or um, I remember a dog telling me that it had a very sore behind, and I was very concerned. And I got back to the lady and I said, "Oh gosh, your dog was okay. It wasn't in any pain. Excuse me, but it had a very sore behind." And she said, "Oh yes, it had its anal glands cleaned yesterday." And I thought, "Oh, poor boy." So yeah, so I can feel physical sensations, so hot, cold. So if a rescue animal has experienced, being cold or being wet or being beaten, but I feel those things as well. You might have caught a recent post of mine about an animal that was a dog that was afraid of its own bed, and that's because the shelter that it had been kept in, its bed had been overrun with ants, and there was just this. That was a horrible sensation. I was just this sensation of ants crawling all over me, and this poor dog had this in its bed, and that's why when it got taken into its new home, it wouldn't go anywhere near its bed. It would sleep everywhere except on its bed. But that's because it remembered that its bed had all the ants on. So yeah, so sensation. So that's another way that I can receive messages. Hey Laura, that was ticklish when you did that to Pablo. Oh, was it? The Reiki scan. Oh, bless him. Cool. Okie dokie. So, right, back to the restaurant. So you look down at the food that you've ordered now. Can you picture it on your plate? What have you ordered? What have you ordered from the menu? Perhaps it's, I don't know, quiche with salad. Can you see the lovely browned crust of the quiche? I've had dinner, so I'm okay. I hope you guys have all had dinner. Can you maybe see the rippled surface of the quiche where the cheese is melted with maybe, I don't know, leeks or whatever flavor quiche you're having? Maybe you can see the lovely green salad leaves on the side, and maybe there's salad dressing on the top. You know what? You can see it, can't you? You can picture it. Visual images and moving images are the main ways that I get messages from animals. In animal communication and in the psychic world, everybody has a strength, a specific strength in the way they receive messages. For me, well, we'll come back to the other one later, but one of them for me is being able to see images. So I get a lot of images. I see a picture of something, like a bowl or a vegetable or a toy or a tree, but I also get moving images. So I can see animals jumping or snuggling up to people or playing or sleeping or doing whatever. A cat once showed me, this was so beautiful. A cat once showed me a beautiful golden, like, orb around it and all the other cats and people in the household. And it was such a beautiful image. It like went over the whole house. It was so beautiful. And when I fed it back to the client, she actually told me that every night she visualized this beautiful globe of protection over her family and her animals. And it was incredible to know that the cat sensed that. Because I mean, I didn't know the lady had done that. Why would I know that? And it's another one of those moments where you're just so blown away. You just think there's so much out there. There's so much out there that we don't know and appreciate. It really is. So yeah, so images and moving images is another way that I receive animals. Okay, so back to the restaurant. So you've got your food. Now you're ready to take your first mouthful. What does it taste like? What food have you ordered? What does it taste like? So going back to the quiche example, what is it? Are you getting the nice creamy, tangy taste of the cheese and the leeks and that lovely flavor of the crust of the quiche and the crispy sort of watery texture of the salad and maybe the tart or the sweet salad dressing that's on the salad. You can taste it, right? You taste what it tastes like. If I said to you all, chocolate cake, Christmas pudding, mince pies, biscuits, you all know what it tastes like. We all can imagine how delicious those things are. So that's another way that I can receive messages. Although this one I learned the hard way. I try not to ask this one too much because I naively just thought, well, I can ask an animal, what does that taste like? But, dogs eat fox poo, people, let's face it. All right. I don't really want to know what that tastes like. So I try not to ask, try not to ask this question too often. The only time I tend to ask this question is if we're trying to find out from an animal what food it prefers to eat. So I'll say to the client, okay, what are the animal's choices? And then I can say to the animal, right, what do you feel like? What does it taste like? What type of enjoyment, what sensations do you get when you taste this food? And then I write those down. And then I ask the same questions. What sensations, what enjoyment, what feelings, what taste do you get when you eat this food? And then I jot it down. And then we can see from the animal, okay, it likes the chicken flavor food, but boy, it loves the beef flavored food because of the messages that I get back. Okay, so that's the only time I ask an animal about taste. Okay, so that was taste. So that's another way I can receive messages. So back to the restaurant, you finish your meal. It was delicious. You're very happy now. You sit back. Your atmosphere in the restaurant is pleasant. There's music playing gently in the background. People around you are chatting. You've just had a lovely meal. You're feeling happy. You're feeling calm. You feel grateful. You feel really just content with the world. Those are emotions. Those are feelings. Can you equally imagine those feelings if they had brought your quiche and there was a cockroach on the side of the plate? Or perhaps they brought you your coffee and it was cold, or it had a fly floating on top of it, right? The feelings that you would then get would be disgust, they would be disappointment, they would be anger. These are emotions. And I get a lot of emotions as feedback from animals. They range from fabulous, right? So love, gratitude, loyalty, security, happiness, trust, all those beautiful, beautiful things that we all wish for our animals. But you can't have the good without having the bad. And I do get all the bad emotions too. If animals have come from troubled past, if they're in a situation now that they're frightened of, if they're not happy, if they have a pending vet visit that they're very afraid of, if they've just been attacked by another dog and they're needing help getting through the trauma, those sorts of things, those are tough. I won't deny it. Those are tough. But it's about allowing that animal to share those feelings and to be heard. And we all know that when we're struggling with something, it's often really nice just being able to sit with somebody who wants to listen and who cares and who's wanting to make things better. So in those situations, I try and make the animal understand that it's safe. It can share anything it wants, and I will feed it back to their guardian, who will do their best to try and make life comfortable for them. So yeah, I mean, I love what I do. It is the most incredible thing. I never imagined that there even was such a thing, let alone that I would be able to do it. So I'm incredibly grateful for it. But it does get very, very emotional. I do a lot of transition readings, a lot of animals who are about to pass. And because I provide a lot of support for clients as well, it gets hard because you speak to the animal beforehand, you support the client through, and then either the animal passes away or the date that the animal will be put to sleep. And I always light a candle and I say a few words. And, we all know, as somebody does who's in the chat, losing an animal is incredibly hard and their lives are just not long enough. But that's the beauty of having an animal, that they are with us for that length of time, and we just have to try and make the absolute most of it. But it does make it very emotional. But at the same time, because of that, it makes it also beautiful. Slight digression there. So that was the restaurant scene. So now you know the different ways that I can receive those messages from animals. Now, if you're aware of psychic jargon, you will be aware that those things that we've just discussed are called the clairs. You may be familiar with the word clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is often misused as the ability to predict the future. Clair is actually French for clear. So clairvoyance is clear seeing. When I get images and moving movies, if I get little movies and images from animals, I'm using clairvoyance to be able to see those pictures. When you're hearing things, when you're hearing dogs barking or metallic sounds clanking or things like that, it is clairaudience because you're hearing it. Smelling things, when you're smelling the cookies or the roast chicken or the coffee or the smelly dog, you are experiencing clairsalience. Sensing things is clairsentience. You may have heard of that one. That pops up quite a lot. Clairvoyance, seeing things. Tasting things is clairgustance. And feeling things is clairempathy. So many people have, highly sensitive people often have the clairempathy because you can pick up emotions of things, of people, of groups of people, of animals, of places very, very easily. So the very last one is claircognizance. And I left this one to last because this is the trickiest one to describe, because the clairvoyance is when you see something, clairaudience is when you hear something. Claircognizance is when you just know something. You have no idea how you know it. The idea, the thought, the thing doesn't appear as an image, as something you hear, something you taste, something you feel. It's like a fact that all of a sudden sits in your head and you just know that it's there. That is my second strongest one that comes through, and it's the hardest one to trust. If I get an image in my head that I know is not mine, because if I'm sitting here looking at a picture of a dog and all of a sudden I get a picture of a beach, okay, I know it's not me. I know it's come from the dog. But just knowing something was at the beginning slightly harder to trust, because you kind of think, well, where did that come from? But, through time and through learning to trust yourself and through validation and verification from clients, I've learned to trust that a lot more now. But it's a tough one. It's a tough one. So those are the different ways that you can, or the ways that I can receive messages from animals. So that is the end of that. Did anybody have any questions about anything I've spoken about? Any questions about how it works or anything? Just hit me with your questions. Just going to move this over and I can bring the question tab over here. There we go. I'm not looking over there all the time. Any questions about animal communication? I've just checked. I have answered everything so far, haven't I? Yeah. Any questions? Like a water in the meantime. Stacy says, no questions. I'll be booking a session very soon. Yay! I do have a newsletter which offers a discount every month on different types of readings. So depending on if there's a national animal day, like I think, was it February? I think it was February that was answer your answer your cat's questions day. So for the month of February, I offered a discount on any readings for cats. So what I'll do is I'll put the link to subscribing the newsletter into the live. It might be there, but if not, I'll double check. And if you fancy, Stacey, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and then maybe you can get a discount. Excuse me. So Jen says, me too. Look forward to booking a session soon. Yay! Christy says, no questions. Thanks. So interesting. You're very, very welcome. Debbie. I did wonder when I saw the DP. Thank you so much for this live. I'm sure Bon and Hari say hi. I'm sure they do. Yes. Brilliant. Okie dokie. Okay. I'm just going to hang on just a minute or so, just in case anybody thinks of a question. And then I will be on my way. You're welcome, Elsa. So Nikki has a question. This is brilliant. What language do you communicate in? Animals don't learn their ABCs or are taught English, so how do you speak/receive messages? So that's a great question, Nikki. And I think somebody has asked me that before when they had rescue dog. Oh, Debbie, was it maybe you? Where they had rescue dogs that were Korean. And there was this, okay, well, you speak English. The dogs have had, this Korean background. So now how's that going to work exactly? So when you ask, how do you speak/receive messages, what I've just gone through in the live about how I receive messages from animals is how I receive the messages. So what an animal does is it will tap into your database of knowledge. So if I have, I'll give you an example. So I had a lady that asked its dog, what don't you like? And I got a picture in my head of a blue bowl. Okay, a blue bowl. And I communicated back to the lady, your dog doesn't like the blue bowl. The lady said, there isn't a blue bowl. This was very funny. There isn't a blue bowl. And I said, no, there must be a blue bowl because the animal showed me a blue bowl. And she said, no, there's no blue bowl. Anyway, a couple of days later, she called me up and she said, I know what your blue bowl is. It's actually a kiddie's swimming pool. You know those little, it's like in the shape of a shell, and you can open them up and you put sand in one side and water in the other, and the kiddies can play in it. And she'd bought one of these for her dogs. But the one dog absolutely loved it, and the other dog absolutely hated it. So we learned what the blue bowl was. But now the blue bowl that I saw in my head isn't necessarily the blue bowl that the animal had seen. The animal's able to tap into my brain and find a picture of a blue bowl to show me. All right. So they might not communicate in English. So sometimes the animal, I digress. So they will give me an image of something to communicate what they're trying to communicate. On that same premise, sometimes I will get words. It doesn't mean that the animal is able to speak English. It's that the animal's higher self, because remember, animal communication is done via mental telepathy. So I'm able to tap in and the animal taps in and then we connect that way. That way, they can speak English because it's the higher self communicating to me. So they might not be communicating to me in English, but my higher self is understanding it as English. God, I hope that makes sense, because even as I'm saying it, I'm going, oh, that sounds rubbish. So sometimes I'll get words, I'll get phrases, but that's because they're able to tap into to my language and use that for me. It doesn't mean that they're speaking that language. I really hope that makes sense. But Nikki, if you didn't catch it, I literally just went through an exercise in a restaurant where we went through all the different ways that I can receive messages from animals. And it's mostly through images and sounds and smells and sensations and emotions and little moving movies and things like that. So I can speak to animals all over the world because there isn't that language barrier. I hope that understands. I hope that makes sense. Stacy says, any discounts for National German Shepherd Day in the US? Oh, I don't know. Maybe we have to create one, Stacy. Debbie, it was you. Yes, so I asked you as the dogs are both from Korea. Yes, it did. It rang a bell. It rang a bell, yes. So Sophie T says, do they communicate via images rather than spoken languages? Or do our animals understand us in words or sounds? So Sophie, I just did an exercise, if you perhaps missed it, where I went through like pretending we were sitting in a restaurant and visualizing the food and how it smelt and how it tasted and things like that. That's how they communicate. So that's how they will send the messages. And that's also how I give information back. I perhaps didn't mention that. So when I'm communicating with an animal, perhaps preparing an animal for a vet visit, like I mentioned early on that there was that dog that was going to have some really quite complicated MRIs and scans. What I did was I Googled a picture of the machine that would be doing all of those medical imaging so that I could say to the animal, this is what it's going to look like, but don't be frightened. You will lie on this table here. And I picture it. I picture the animal lying, and all the time in myself, I'm imagining myself calm, feeling secure, even though I'm shit scared of MRIs, but we didn't go there. Calm, secure, say to the animal, you're fine, you're going to be on a bed. They might give you something that'll make you a little bit sleepy, but it's okay. You're safe. There'll be somebody there looking out for you. There'll be kind people supporting you. You might hear noises. I imagine the noises in my head of the clunking and the sliding, etc., etc. So that's how I give the messages to animals as well. So it works both ways. That's how they communicate with me, but I use that also back. So, Sophie, I hope that answers your question. Stacey, you are amazing. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Queenie D. Hello, Queenie D. How long between readings should you wait to see if the animal feels better? That, I think, is entirely dependent on what the current issue was, and also what the person's budget is. Because I mean, I'd love to say to you, oh no, you need a reading every day for the next 2 months. But really it's dependent on. There was a cat recently that I was working with, and I think we did a monthly read or every 3 weeks, because it was, it was going to see a vet, then it had to come home, then it had to have its Prozac, or then we had to wait and see if it would take the Prozac, etc., etc., etc. So we gave it 3 weeks because that was enough time for it to see the vet, to have the Prozac, to wait for the Prozac to take its effect, and then to have the follow-up reading to see if things had changed. But that depends on the animal. So if the animal's had like if I'm preparing an animal for a vet visit, I can do the reading a week before, to say to the animal, right, this is what's going to happen. And then perhaps a couple of days later, I'll do another reading to say, right, it's tomorrow. You're safe. You're going to be okay. Everything is going to go like we explained last time. So it's really dependent on the circumstances and on the budget. I guess. I hope that answers your question, Queenie D. Sophie, I wondered if it was you. That's great. Thank you. Eric is sitting on my lap, by the way. Sophie, please tell everybody how old Eric is. I believe he's 21, is he? 21? Yes, he just turned 21, didn't he, Sophie? Ah, Regine, it's you, Queenie D. Now I see Frankie and Teddy. Ah, okay. Okay, it's for Frankie and Teddy to check if things have improved. Okay, I see now, yes. So yeah, whenever you're ready. Whenever you're ready. He is. Sophie says Eric is 21. Yeah, incredible. I think he must be the oldest cat I know. He must be the oldest cat I know. Sophie won I did some competitions back in February when we had the Answer Your Cat Questions Day, and I was offering some. I did like a competition, and Sophie won one of the free mini readings, and I read for her cat Eric. And he's 21, so yeah. Right, Regine, I will chat with you on email whenever you're ready, okay? For the two doggies. Super duper, okie dokie. So I think that's it. Any more questions? Any more questions for any more questions? I'll just wait. Okay, how are we doing for time? Ooh, 9:15 already. Gosh, it's gone quickly. So I hope that you've enjoyed it and you've found it useful. For those of you who don't know, I am on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, but LinkedIn is my favorite. So I do post daily. I post real life stories about cases that I've had, so that people can understand the types of things that you can use animal communication for. I do try to keep my YouTube channel updated as well. I do try to have videos regularly. I just did one recently on why I don't deal with missing animals. And I'm always available in email. If anybody has any questions about the process or doesn't understand how it can perhaps work for their animal, please feel free to just email me and ask me, because I'm more than happy to explain how it all works and if there's a way that we can try and help your animal. So my email address is colleen@colleenkersey.com. All the details are in the description field of the YouTube video. But other than that, I think we shall leave that for the night. Thank you all so much for joining. It was fabulous to see, a lot of you, and a few of you I know already, so that's really cool. And yeah, if you would like me to do a live again, please just say, and I will catch you online, on email, on the website, on a social media platform of choice. Thank you all very, very much for joining, and I will see you soon. Cheers for now then. Bye, everyone.